So artist-led space in Birkenhead as discussed. Work there doing curation and program development, and I'm also an occasional artist.
Nice. So what we thought we'd do, just to begin with, is just ask you for a little bit more information about your personal journey into your current position and like where you are within Liverpool art scene. So if you want to get started, Claire.
So I think I've basically done a very traditional route of I did art GCSE, I did an art foundation, I did a BA honours in fine art, which I just graduated from last July, and from that I had been volunteering mostly before uni, and then especially during uni for different organisations across the Merseyside art scene, such as Liverpool Biennial, Tate, Light Night, Open Culture, just various organisations. And that really helped me to sort of understand what my interests were, what sort of mediums I enjoyed, what part of public engagement I enjoyed. And so from that, I applied for a learning intern role at Tate Liverpool after being a Tate Collective producer for them, which is a young person's learning programme. So I was on that programme for uni, which helps to sort of shape and develop public programme in the forms of lates around exhibitions. So from that connection, I sort of had my way in. So it was really a great opportunity that as soon as I graduated, I was ready to go into that learning intern position. And then from that, I've gained my current position as the learning assistant in the Liverpool Biennial, which I started just in March. Yeah.
Thanks.
I had a similar route in terms of sort of the traditional beginning as like starting doing a photography BA, and then coming out realising I didn't have sort of a social circle outside of Wales. Started volunteering at Open Eye Gallery alongside sort of making my own work. Then got a sort of brief role as gallery manager, so sort of managing the front of house, running some events and stuff for them. Led on to Liverpool Biennial, where I was running a single group show called Tromarama, which is like an Indonesian trio. That ended up being curated by a gallerist called Jennifer Ellis, who was a curator at Edward Malone Gallery in Hong Kong. She sort of, as a joke, I think, initially invited me to come and work with her. And I was like, well, if there's a bit of money on it, yeah, sure, I'll jump on. Ended up doing some commission work there for Open Eye, which showed us Look Photo Biennial 2017. Realised that I had absolutely no money and missed all my family and friends. Came back to Liverpool, where I started an internship with Open Eye Gallery, and yeah, sort of grew my role from there. So what I do now is I sort of look after our emerging artists, so people who are coming in for portfolio reviews and stuff. I sort of like point them in separate directions. I also run our open call and our online platforms now as well.
Amazing, thanks Declan. Joanna?
Hello, so my path is a bit unconventional, not like Declan or Claire. I graduated in politics and about 10 years ago, and I did a master's degree in military strategy, and then that gave me a job in Brussels at NATO HQ. I worked there until 2015. I've always wanted to be an artist since I remember existing. And so after experiencing working in this type of environment, I just decided it was about time to quit and just go back to what I've always wanted to do. But I suppose I come from a slightly different society and educational model, so art doesn't have many opportunities in my country. that's why I did what I did. So in 2015, I came to the UK. I did a foundation in art and design just to go back to feel comfortable with the art practice. And then I just started painting, got a studio space with another art collective, and then moved on to built my own studio, and have been, painting, doing a bit of sculpture. A year ago, I did a European Union funded residency in Spain. I was meant to be doing another one at the moment in Lithuania, but everything is cancelled. So had quite a lot of shows in these past few years. And yeah, I want to carry on building this path, because it's been really rewarding compared to what I was meant to be doing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thanks, Joanna. Max, if you want to give us a bit about your personal journey.
Well, yeah, actually, no, I went to uni for a year, and then I hated it, so I left. I tried to do a photography course, but it was terrible. It was just difficult. So then after that, I went to Cambodia for like 6 years, where I ran something called Otres Market, which was like a loud music hippie arts market thing. And then after coming back from that, so I'd been interested in primarily graffiti. When I was a teenager, I was sort of obsessed with graffiti, and that was like my main way into like creativity, I suppose, and art. And then when I was away, I was like faffing around with it, but not really. I was just sort of doing it because it was fun, I suppose. And then when I decided to come back to England, again, I was still just like dicking around with it for a bit. And then I ended up meeting some people at the Royal Standard, managed to get myself a studio. And then from there, just sort of fell in love with the whole environment, like just being around other people that were also doing mad stuff was just like, it was brilliant just to be surrounded by 40 people who are all equally crazy. That was like sort of rewarding and valuable. So then after a year, I applied to be one of the artist leads, which means I'm sort of responsible for the day-to-day runnings of it, but then also curating shows and, building a program and connecting with artists and stuff. And that, I didn't really know that I was missing that, because I had a couple of years of just making and just painting, and that was like really like, I was in a really sweet spot. But then when I got this extra responsibility, I've sort of been enjoying it. And then what I'm realizing is just bringing in some of the things I learned from Cambodia, like in terms of running events and bringing people together and like providing something that's, more community based, I suppose, but in a fun way. So yeah, I'm going to carry on doing all of it. That's the plan.
Yeah, amazing.
I say maybe it'd be good to give a little explanation of what Shuffle is as well. Just
Shuffle. So Shuffle is a one-night event where I occupy lots of different spaces within where our studio is situated. It's in this big warehouse with lots of other companies and stuff in. So what I do is I borrow any extra space. We've had cupboards and other gallery spaces and other people's studios and in the hallway. And then I give those spaces over to other galleries or curators or artists, and they basically get to do whatever they want for that one night. We've started incorporating music, and there's a bar, and so we're pulling in. What I'm trying to do is bring the whole community together and have fun, just for a night, and then it's just sort of disbands. It's like this one-off kind of like secretive thing. And then for the first one, Convenience did it. Didn't even have a nice time, which I'm grateful for you doing.
Yeah, I think it's a sort of interesting lead into the topic that this is sort of around, about the ideas of what our places are within this and what our art community looks like. I mean, in terms of like the story for Convenience, it was kind of born out of the idea of like, I went to uni, did all this sort of like, this is what you do, this is where you go, this is where you end up, and then sort of got lost in the little bit like after where it was like, this is where you end up, and I was like, I don't really know where that is now.
Yeah.
And sort of after time of doing bits and bobs and sort of coming up to Liverpool more and engaging and doing events with a thing called Small Steps, which was like community events, similar thing, one-off events, but on a much smaller scale to Shuffle. It kind of led me and Andy originally to the conversation around creating like a dedicated art space, with sort of just the intent of what we wanted it to be. We got the option to to go into a space that was essentially free within an old style market, and then from there just spent the last sort of 6 to 8 months building up what that was, working with artists from the area, international artists, community organisations, local organisations, and then sort of like larger gallery spaces like Open Eye. And that sort of led us to where we are now. Like this, originally on this night would have been a touring exhibition of a group of Merseyside artists taken to Bath. And that was what the original intent to celebrate Merseyside art was. And instead we're here talking about it because of this current situation. I think also what's really interesting there is sort of seeing how everyone's able to like develop, like everyone's stories are so different, and we're sort of ending up in like similar spaces, whether that's as artists or as facilitators or creators or like education, whatever it is. It's quite interesting to see how everyone's path influences the sort of roles where we are. It's like important for people to understand that there's no set path to get into places, although maybe there are preferred versions. I don't know. Yeah, I guess we should lead on to the next bit.
Yeah.
So, sorry, do you want to go or do you want me to?
No, you can, Ryan. Go for it.
I guess we're looking at like the idea of like the artist led and the sort of art scene there. That's given a slight overview of the art scene, but it'd be good to sort of get an understanding of everyone's perspectives on sort of our local art scene, like Liverpool's an area. And I guess we'll start with sort of the positive things surrounding that, and looking into what that is and how it works. I guess I don't know if that's too big of a question or.
That seems good.
Yeah. Does anyone want to start off?
Well, I really enjoy how scrappy Liverpool can be in terms of their DIY art scene. Like, if there's something not being built, we'll just kind of build it. I also like that sort of lots of people come to Liverpool and become enveloped in that sort of DIY space rather than, you know, if you're a Liverpool artist, you have to only show here type thing. I mean, working with you guys with in your original space, like we were putting it together a really good exhibition out of sort of whatever we could find. And I think that's that whole sort of experience of having an international artist in a local space, and it sort of being held together at times with duct tape, but from the front it looks like this spectacular thing. I think that sort of sums up Liverpool's art scene for me.
That's nice. I agree. I think what I've enjoyed so much about being in Liverpool is that it's still, the whole place still has like a feeling of possibility about it. Like you can kind of just do stuff more so than I think, you know, imagine if we lived in Manchester or I don't know, Leeds, but basically anywhere, it sort of appears like it just, Liverpool's just, I don't know, it just seems like there's little gaps and little things and you can just sort of get into it.
Well, I guess you're the master of like looking for spaces and trying to find your way into them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah. So the industrial past is something that's, you know, and just the amount of like the warehouses and there's, I don't know, just this the city itself is interesting, just like visually and for materials and yeah, and space. There's lots of space available. I think it lends itself to what we're all doing.
There's enough debris to build on.
Yep.
Enough debris to build on.
What about you, Claire or Joanna? Joanna, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say that I live in a very industrial side of Liverpool, so I don't really remember when was the last time that I've been to the art shop. So living here, and Liverpool is so industrial that you're actually able to source all kinds of materials and turn them into whatever you want. So I don't think I've lived in many places, and this is the only city where I can actually find like all kinds of, you know, paint that has been used, and you can just buy 7 liters of paint for £1, things like that. Big pieces of material that you can turn into, canvases, wood that you can build stretchers from. My dog is destroying my house. Sorry, that's why I keep looking back. But yeah,
I was just gonna ask. Obviously, from your perspective, being sort of the artist out of, I mean, I know everyone here is essentially an artist. That's kind of the point. But I think, in terms of you've been much more focused over the last, well, I guess, what, three or 4 years now, but especially in the last year and a half, on like exhibiting, on like building opportunities around that. And I wondered if you could like maybe we can have a bit of a discussion about what it's like from that perspective, from that side of things. So what it's like for you finding the opportunities, what those opportunities mean or what they don't mean, possibly.
I usually think that there's like 2 routes to go down. One is you apply for everything that you find. There's a few websites that congregate all kinds of opportunities, residencies, open calls, etc. So you just spend a good amount of time and you apply. And the other route, it's, I can see that because I'm a bit of an outsider. So I didn't go to art school. I didn't go to university to study art. I did to do something else. So I had to break stone from the beginning. So I had to meet people that are related to the art world, and you take it from there. So you need to put yourself in those circles, because if nobody knows that you exist, how can you make work with a gallery or with a curator or whatever? So you need to put an effort in socializing with people that want to work with you and choose you to have exhibitions or to come and do talks at certain places. For me, it's not only about showing my work, but it's also, I really enjoy lecturing about it or having the opportunity to go and talk about subjects that guide my art practice. So I've been experiencing going to John Moores University or Liverpool University to talk about philosophy of the art, what's the meaning of all of this. So it's just going to certain events and making an effort to meet as many people as possible, applying for residencies, applying for painting prizes, or whatever it's your practic prizes, and then you get to know people in certain organizations, having studio visits. So while I was part of a studio, I had a lot of studio visits, and that made me get close to people that I never imagined, that are not necessarily based in Liverpool. So yeah, it's we only exist with people.
Yes.
Through people.
I think that's one thing that is definitely like a massive positive of like the Liverpool scene. I mean, like, a year ago I didn't know basically anyone here. And we could have had another 50 people on this call discussing this topic, but it would have never really gone anywhere. Too many people Zoom conversation, that whole thing. But I think it's just there's something really, Liverpool doesn't seem to like operate as like a clique in that sense of it being like, well, they're here. It's like it's just a huge circle of people that all seem to sort of be pretty willing to share with each other, whether that's like opportunity, funding, support. I think it's definitely as a city, like it's just might be that classical thing when you drive into city where Liverpool is like, what's it say, cold city warm, and it just seems to ring like incredibly true within the art scene. Like it's so, I think for the most part it's super open, and I think that's one of the things that like is really like a great backbone of the possibility of Liverpool. Instead of, it doesn't feel like competitive, it feels supportive, I guess.
Joanna, you wanted to say something in the middle of that?
No, I was just going to say, so in order for that to happen, you just need to be open-minded and be willing to talk to people. So not because you said the word cliquey, I think.
Yeah.
So if you don't think about it, and if you're just open to, you know, get to talk to anyone, even if you think that person is not exactly your cup of tea, a lot more opportunities are gonna come your way because you just open your horizons to meet all kinds of people, really. Yeah, I came to Liverpool with an open mind because I was starting from zero again, and that hasn't that could only be good. It has been really good. I think everyone in Liverpool that is interested in art, if I think that they know me or they heard about me because I've been putting myself out there. Even when I didn't have an art show, I found places around the city to put my art in there, like a cafe or you know, like a meeting room or whatever.
Yeah.
So I did an effort to be visible.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's
Claire wanted to say anything more on this. We haven't heard from Claire.
Yeah, just what everyone's been talking about, like it is something that Liverpool as a city is known for being like warm, welcoming, friendly, and I think that's to do with like the Thatcher era and the idea of like it was us against the government basically trying to turn their back on Liverpool, but then also it comes from a great pride from the football team and the success of that, and just that general feeling that Liverpool gives to people who do visit. And it's really interesting how international the scene has become, and like from everyone who I've met who has traveled to Liverpool, it feels like they just get stuck here, like it's never part of their plan. Like I know, Joanna, it wasn't part of your plan that you would still be here, and like, the amount of people I've met who said I was just meant to be like doing like a year here and then I was going to be somewhere else. But it's interesting that people do stand like just stick around, and I don't know if that's to do with like the city itself or to do with how maybe like the art scene is pretty accessible. Like you just we're all friendly and that, and you can just go up and talk to people, and that's like definitely how probably 90% of my opportunities have come about. Like my current role was from my now boss messaging me on Instagram saying I'd love for you to apply to this, and we only had like a friendship from meeting at private views, and then I did do like one project where I was a participant on something that she was leading, and so that relationship has now created an opportunity for me, and it's really good that our scene is small enough to nurture things. Like she's definitely seen me throughout uni and has obviously been keeping tabs on me to the point where she's like, I want you to be my assistant. So I think it's good that you can see the trajectory of different people and where they've come from. So it's really a nurturing scene. And the other thing I was going to say was as a city, like geographically, it's already small, it's already close knit. You can get from one side of town to the other in like 20-30 minutes. And that really helps on like Thursday nights or private view nights. And you like, it's just known that you wouldn't go to just one, maybe you could hop around to different ones. So I think that creates like a hub and an excitement and creates like a community of like, oh, I'll see you at that gallery because I'm going this show first. And I think that's really exciting. So you're not just stuck in one place for the night. You actually get to see so many different practices, so many different spaces, and so many different people in a really accessible way.
I think maybe another point that might be interesting is to look at how I mean, seemingly more so now, like large. I mean, I haven't been here for that long, but maybe other people can contest this. But like, it seems like larger organisations are definitely starting to more involved with like what you would traditionally call like artist-led space. It seems to be a beginning of more of a crossover in terms of support. I know, like with obviously Declan doing a lot of stuff with emerging artists at OpenEye, and they've got a lot of offers going on there for people to get involved with like these things that would be considered institutions. Same with Tate in Liverpool. Like it's not a place that ever in my mind I thought you'd be able to get around the table and sit in and discuss with like people like me. I think me and Max went to one of the Tate Associate days. Like this feels bizarre, but also like great, obviously. I just think there's a lot of And there's a lot of interesting points in like Liverpool as a community space, and in terms of how everyone interacts. So I guess it's definitely a positive. I'm just wondering if anyone has got any other things they think are sort of like the definite positives that come from the scene here.
I don't want to wrap this up, but I think economics and education play the biggest part in why is Liverpool a good place for our artists to be, because you've got a few universities that have a degree in art, and Liverpool, it's one of the cheapest big cities in the UK to be. The rents are quite cheap.
Yeah.
So students finish their degrees and then they stick around because, and also culturally speaking, Liverpool has always been, you know, an artistic city. It's good for music. It's got Lipa as well. So it was a European cultural capital a few years ago. So there's a biennial, there's a Tate here. There's John Moore's Painting Prize, which is one of the most important painting prizes in Europe, actually. So there's all these things in Liverpool, and the rents are still cheap. So easily you can get together with a couple of friends and start a studio space, or, you know, or rent a place and then sublet it to other artists and make it like a big art collective. And there's still a lot of property as well. So I think those two ingredients make Liverpool quite a unique city to, you know, to start something.
Yeah.
I think it's small enough that you have to like walk past each other's houses to get to somewhere as well. Like the idea of like actually seeing someone on the way to an opening instead of something being on the outskirts. I think sort of geographically, like you were saying, John, it's Liverpool's like this big, the clusters there, and if there's anything happening, it's only there or there. Even if something's happening in like Birkenhead, it's like 2 minutes on the train. It's I think we're really lucky to have a sort of communal art web, as it were. Sort of like, you know, you're going to meet someone on Seal Street because that's just next to loads of different places, and there's a lot of good bars there as well. Yeah, I think where it pushes an idea of collectivism, and I think that's what I'm sort of recognising at the moment as things are going online. People are still working very locally online. I mean, look at this. I mean, I've met all of you. And here we are online, sort of talking to Bath. You know.
Yeah, hi Bath.
So yeah, good point.
I sort of wonder sometimes. I think that the smallness of the city centre is a double-edged sword in that it's great for what we've all said, that, you know, we're close to each other, we can like pop around and meet each other very quickly. But I think that we kind of neglect the rest of it in a way. And yet there's lots of opportunities if we were to, you know, collectively decide that we were going to not be so lazy, as it were, and we would travel for 15 minutes. There's all sorts of things that we could be occupying and getting involved with. And that's sort of something that I'm going to be thinking about just sort of after Corona, I think, is trying. But then, I mean, what does everyone else think about it? There's a sort of, you know, in town, it feels like easy. But I think we're being continually squashed out of town in a way as well. So I think that we will.
It was a challenge like we faced from the beginning, being in Birkenhead, was just getting people to cross the water, and what you're saying about the additional opportunities. Like there's quite a lot of space in the Wirral for artists to occupy. And I think it is, I suppose it is that like getting people to come out of the city centre as well and come into those spaces. I mean, Sefton was meant to be the Borough of Culture this year, which I suppose it still is, but obviously like the lost opportunity they've had in getting people out into that area as well. So yeah, I think you're right in what you're saying, really.
I mean, because we're very fortunate in the way that we're connected by the Mersey rail, so we've basically got an underground for you Bath people. So it's, you know, we're really well connected. But I wonder if the arts community, which we are here representing, is utilising it as much as we could be. I mean, you boys from Convenience, you're doing well because Ryan. You said to me that you're trying to create the Brooklyn to Liverpool's New York. I tell everybody that now because I think it's perfect.
I don't even remember saying that, as if I'd say something so ridiculous.
I like it. I think it's a good thing to. I like it.
But it's a really good point, because I think there is some issues obviously that come with being in the centre of town and like sort of things that we're watching unfold in front of us. And at the moment, this is like largely focused on like the live music venues, but we're seeing people being pushed out quite constantly at the moment due to like redevelopment and rebuilding. So it's definitely something that should be considered to remove it out from the centre. And it's about, I guess it's about building audiences as well, because I guess if you take it out into an area where those things aren't commonplace, you build like a new audience within that area that then gets to engage with the stuff that's predominantly focused within sort of like a square mile.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, as I was thinking about what you were saying, Max, about like Mersey Rail, you've got like really connected from Chester to Southport, and it would cost you like a £5 for like a day ticket, and that's like such a huge area. So it is what you're saying, Ryan, is how do you connect those audiences and get people going from one end to the other, and everybody collectively going to all of the things that are going on in those different sections. Yeah.
I mean, this is like things that like Light Night, obviously, which is like a citywide arts festival, does really well, and the biennials. But obviously they only happen once a year or once every 2 years for a prolonged period of time. So I guess it's about looking how we can work collectively with the other like abundance of spaces, which we've just found out there sort of is. There's like an absolute ton of us. And it's this idea of us working together to build out this network that then could spread over areas, rather than, I guess it's the idea of like working together on cross promotion and sort of like creating this supportive identity. Maybe you get the benefits of being able to spread wider afield, rather than, so the benefit of being in the city centre is just that, isn't it? It's, you're in the city centre where people go to go out. But if you put these things in different areas, such as like Scrapyard Studios was doing in C4 for a period of time, like they just had like really nice community engagement from that local area and that community around there. So I think, and there's always that benefits of moving out to new spaces and being able to build there, rather than struggling to survive as artist-led organisations directly within the centre of sort of these things.
I just got a question here from Instagram, if anyone wants to answer it. It's how do you find local people relate to the art you produce? Don't know if...
Oh, they love it. No, I'm joking. I don't know. There's taste for everything. I don't know.
It's an interesting one for us, by taking the sort of decision that we did to open in a market that was like completely public facing. So from day one, we were under public scrutiny for like the possibly occasional bizarre things that were going on within there, when they were wondering why two guys were sat in the market without anything for sale for 90% of the time, which was a really interesting sort of learning curve for us, because it took us from, like, we knew what it was we knew what it was going to be when we were going there, but it didn't necessarily mean that we knew how to interact immediately and respond. And we sort of spent most of our time having the immediate sort of like people walking past and looking in and being a bit like, oh, well, what's going on in there? And then us having to be like, right, let's go over and tell them, let's go over and interact with these people. And it sort of was like 6 months of us interacting with the public that started off coy at first and then ended up having some like really good relationships, and people also like opening up about their own art. Like maybe they thought, because we had like, contemporary visual art shows, that maybe it was like different, and our whole thing was to like demystify that as like an idea by putting it in the setting that we did. And it just ended up with loads of really interesting conversations that I think opened up what we were doing to everyone, and also running that alongside like free workshops, and it just gave us plenty of time to like sit down with people
I think the workshops is a good point, Ryan, because that was something that allowed like anyone to come and have a chat with the artist for a prolonged period of time. We were sitting like by sitting down like an artist to lead that workshop for 2 hours, like Joanna led one. The people that are coming to that get to then speak to the artist and get to know about the process behind a piece of work. And I think that there's another question here that sort of asks about that, like connectivity between artists is great, but how do you connect to the man on the street who doesn't necessarily relate to your art? And I think it is making those extra efforts to have the conversations with people. And obviously we were in the position where the gallery was in Birkenhead Market, and most people come into the gallery were actually just going to the shop or to have their hair done. So yeah, I think you've covered it already, Ryan, but go on, Joanna.
But that question is interesting, I think, for Ryan and Max to tell the story of how they met.
Yeah.
That's exactly what happened, right?
Yeah, well, I was walking down the street and was just saw Max doing like it was like a public commission or like for a festival that was going on in Liverpool.
Yeah, part of the mural festival, yeah.
Yeah. And just sort of like went up and was like, "Oh, hey, what you doing?" And being like, I felt ridiculous doing it at the time because like it can feel like a daunting thing. And then like obviously ended up with us having like maybe a 2-minute chat. And then the next time I saw him, developed on into more to like the point where, didn't know what it was going to be at the time. I think that's definitely something interesting in terms of a public perception as well. Like it's, you can engage them as much as possible. You want them to engage you as well. And like it's just making sure that as much as possible, you can remove that sort of separation between like gallery artists and the public. Like whenever we do a show, we always want to make sure like artists are there to talk about stuff as much as possible, as well as us. And like, we're not, yeah.
I'm just wondering from Declan's point of view, how you find those kind of connections with your audience at Open Eye.
So we've been in Liverpool since like '77. So we've already got quite a local following, and we're lucky enough to get funding to reach out to people who might not be in our sort of like immediate audience. We find like when we put on workshops and stuff, it's really good. We get people from, the local area, and you can see like L3 represented. But I think some of the best work that we do is in schools, in like prisons, in colleges, in unis, in like older people's groups. We've got we started a camera club in Clubmore. It's about this idea of image literacy. Like we teach people how to read, we teach people how to write, we teach people how to sort of talk, but we are sort of left a little bit unaware of how we engage with images and sort of like physical artwork. But that's how we like communicate with each other, especially sort of like outside of languages. So I think it is sort of going into places and making it part of not necessarily a hardcore curriculum, but putting groups and people in places where there isn't necessarily a voice for the arts, where you're sort of saying, no, come in, like you're welcome before you've stepped into the gallery type thing. So yeah, I mean, if you hear about a gallery through like a 7-year-old kid, like it's going to be accessible, isn't it? In terms of artists that we work with, like I say, I run our open call, so we get a lot of like graduates sending in work. We've got a really good story of a resident photographer that we're working with called Emma Case, who she started her employment with Open Eye Gallery by posting an Instagram story. It was around the FA Cup. We really liked her work. The project was called Red. She was working with like local Liverpool supporters and sort of like following this like red flag throughout the city type thing. We shared it and then ended up being like, oh, I work with this community. So we sort of pushed that, supported that. And then there was a role that came up for a resident photographer for one of our like community groups, and she applied and now works with us. So it's more about, it's not just about building connections to an audience, but understanding that that audience are also artists. They shouldn't just be welcome in a space, but they should be shifting and moving in that space. Like if a gallery exists for an audience, it's making sure that you're constantly connected with them, whether or not they know it.
Yeah, that's really great.
Claire, I was wondering if you could maybe, because you said this to me multiple times when I go through like stress phases, sort of talking about how the future of art exists in these community spaces. And I wondered if you could add anything to that, and possibly also about how, I mean, it's maybe it's a weirder question with the Tate, because I think people do just go to the Tate and go to the biennial, but they must have like programs in place, whether it's education, whether it's public outreach that aims to bring like different aspects of the public in. I wonder if you could talk on those a little bit.
Yeah, so currently like all the work that I'll be doing is definitely community focused, and like it sort of splits the idea of what is our audience into tangible like groups of like, we can only understand you sometimes if you're in a specific group, so it helps that people belong to communities that, yeah, maybe they don't know they're a part of. So maybe they're over 60, maybe they're a veteran, maybe they're a carer. So having these sort of communities to tap into, because within themselves they're community makers, they're makers of meaning, and if you can find a way into the spaces or the conversations that they're occupying and sort of see how art can either help them with seeing things differently, help them with the aims, because community, I feel like, isn't community without an aim. Like whether it's your street, like your aim is maybe that you want to have a peaceful, happy neighborhood, and that's your community aim. So whatever binds them, if you can find where art sits within that, then you'll always have an access point. If obviously that's a very that's a bit of a simplified version of, obviously those relationships are very complex, but so that's mainly our focus with the biennial, is like how can what our biennial is, what the themes are in our biennial, speak to communities, the people that are in the communities, and hopefully that will translate to a wider public, whether that's through just the interpretation of what we're exhibiting or more through conversations or workshops or skill sharing and things like that. What was the other part of the question? Sorry, Ryan.
Oh, sorry. I was more, as you said, because I think you've been to something or been in a discussion about how you believe like art exists, like the possible future of like artist-led and these sort of smaller spaces exist also with like a collaboration with community spaces and community groups.
Yeah, so it was what is the future of artist-led spaces symposium that was at Exhibition Research Lab at LJMU. I can't remember how long ago that was now, but
it's in January.
Mm-hmm. And then it ended with Dave Beach, who's been speaking, working and writing about the artist-led for over 20 years, and his sort of finishing note was that the future of artist-led spaces is that they exist in community-led spaces. So you can't, like, we can talk about how rent is cheap and like it's just so hard for us who are maybe just creatives and we don't know about planning permission, we don't know about what taxes you pay on property, like all these different things that aren't at our fingertips, but maybe we can partner up with community organisations or charities that have a bit more knowledge on that, and that through art it supports them, and like it's a two-way street of charities and community focused organisations partnering with arts organisations or arts-led spaces to sort of let's put a roof over whatever we're trying to do here, let's make sure the gas and electric is running for what we're trying to do, because often for the work that we're doing is so hard to produce money for a good while, and that's sort of a shared thing with charities and community focus groups. So because we share that field and because we do work with people, then that bonds us, and therefore why shouldn't we work together and make things happen rather than try and just do it as independent industries.
I think that's so important in terms of like doing shows and sort of doing festivals and stuff as partners, because it makes it, if someone's coming like new into their art world, it's so difficult to find little indies or like singular people who are putting on like an amazing show, but if it's not connected to something a bit larger, it's how are people going to access it who might not sort of be in that circle? So I think larger organisations have a responsibility to search out smaller organisations who are sort of pushing for a social change or pushing for like a different way of understanding their local area or whatever. But I don't know, it's this idea of like almost giving up ownership of something, isn't it? It's like if you start as a small thing, it's sometimes you're seen as sort of selling out a bit. So if I started a little independent tomorrow, and then for some strange twist of fate, like Tate wanted to partner with me or something, you know, they'd be like, oh well, how do you get that? And like, you know, there'd be a slight stigma to that. I think that's the language that needs to change and reform in light of everyone being in lockdown. Yeah, I think it makes much more sense to have a web of organisations and everything sort of happening together than people trying to sort of like pick their own little postcodes to do things in.
Yeah, it's like I just think like it's very difficult to survive as like these small organizations as we were. Like obviously we've sort of, I guess, partnered, not necessarily partnered, but we've got a relationship with like a community, like the community group, but as to continue to benefit like both the project that you're doing and like the artists that are working with you, like by doing it just solely as like, you know, your little space or your bigger space that exists in this ether, rather than in these conversations with these organizations. Like it surely is still beneficial, like having any of these project spaces going that allow people to get in and work and create stuff is like amazing, but to definitely like further the narrative and like possibilities, opportunities and careers of the people involved with what you're doing, it seems so paramount to like engage with these larger organizations without like, you know, you don't have to give too much away, you don't have to twist yourself into a shape that you know necessarily needs to fit, which, you know, is still an issue that you do face a lot of the time, depending on funding and things like that. It is a really interesting like idea about how you keep autonomy as an art space whilst growing and being able to support people like art. You know, are we only meant to exist for a year or two, or is there a way that you can like create some sustainable growth through partnerships and through these things? And I think there's merit in both, but I think it's as long as you're not losing too much of the identity of what you're meant to be, then you can obviously build in a beneficial way. Sorry, I just got a question here that came up earlier in the chat, and it says, it's really lovely to hear about the art scene in Liverpool, and why you're interested in raising your profile in the Southwest. And I guess that is a kind of question that's simply answered. And I guess this is probably the same for all of us. The ability to like get out to other places and break the sort of occasional like echo chamber of your area is like, that is important to everyone. I know Max and the Royal Standard obviously recently had like generator projects come in, And I know, like, with the work you were doing with Shuffle, that you're looking towards bringing other spaces like into Liverpool.
Yeah.
And it's just obviously like it's super important to get out of the area as well.
Yeah. Well, like what Joanna was saying, isn't it? Sort of the more people you meet and the more open you are to letting new people in and like seeing what they're up to. And you just, you know, if there's lots of people like roughly aiming in the same direction, it seems more interesting and valuable to me to be in contact with them. So doing things like this is just cool because, you know, well, I mean, it would have been great to go to the actual festival, wouldn't it? And then meet everybody.
Yeah.
That would have been way better.
Yeah.
Yes, it would have been perfect to go to the festival.
I think the other thing, Ryan, as well, on that note of like when we had a discussion about coming in and taking an exhibition to Bath, a lot of like conversations we'd had through open calls and open conversations was from artists and asking us about how do you reach new audiences and how do I get out of just exhibiting here. So they might have their studio in Liverpool, but they want to be able to exhibit in new places and to new audiences and to have different conversations around that. So from our point of view, it was about trying to find opportunities where we could support artists to go to new spaces, new audiences as well, which I think is important and something as an artist. Like I exhibited at Fringe Art Bath last year and yeah, it is good to go and see how people are doing things differently somewhere else and what the people are like there and everything within that. Yeah.
Well, I guess again, like Joanna, like obviously, I mean, you went off and have done residencies in other places, and obviously your aim is to like exhibit like nationally and internationally. I don't know if you want to talk about the importance of like, well, the importance to you personally about getting out and going to these other spaces.
My just before we get into that, can I just say something? I think there's a man in Liverpool who's doing a lot for the art scene, which is he's called Rory Macbeth, and he's I don't want to make a mistake, but he's a lecturer at John Moores Uni, and every time there's an exhibition, even if it's the smallest exhibition in Liverpool, he's there, and every week he lets his students know what's going on in the Liverpool art scene agenda. So I've never seen, like, it's not very usual to see a lecturer, a person who has a full-time job in a university to, you know, be present at every single event, even though there's a bit of an age gap between him and most of these artist-led studio spaces that he comes and he makes sure that he's aware of everything that is going on. And also he suggests that to his students. So I think that definitely makes a big difference because, and brought a lot of people together in the Liverpudlian art scene lately. Because I think in school, you know, books are compulsory to read, and teachers push you to read, to, you know, but nobody tells you to go and see exhibitions. And art is the language that is not so pushed for, you know, since you were a kid to consume and to get used to, you know, to put your art goggles and know how to look into arts. So I think if that was more promoted education-wise, you know, we wouldn't be having this conversation because art would have like more support. About going abroad, I don't know, it's really good because the more the merrier. You go, you meet people from different cultures. It can only feed into your knowledge and into different ways of seeing the world. So it's really good. It's really good to build bridges with other places as well. To once again to meet more people and to get to know people that feed into your, you know, work and the things that you already know. Even like sometimes you're not aware that you're getting inspired, and that's what's so special. Even like trying foods that you never imagined that you would So everything you experience, I think it's really valuable. And if you get more, if you go out more of your comfort zone, the more chances you have to grow that you were not expecting. So I love going and do residencies everywhere.
I think the
And
last
uncomfortable residencies are the best ones because they push your limits.
yeah.
So that's good.
I think the last point I'd add on to that question is just if we were in Fab tonight, I think tonight or whenever on Friday, whenever the opening was originally for this event, I think you said last year that they over that sort of first night they have like a mass influx of like 5,000 or however many people. And the point of like going to those places, if you're there and the exhibition is physically happening, post this, that's 5,000 people that are potentially looking at your work that have never seen it before, and that leads to that sort of like boundless possible opportunities, art sales, whatever it is. The reason for getting out of the area is like obviously, as you say, as you said earlier in this, like everyone in Liverpool sort of knows your name. But the benefit to getting out of the area is exactly that. Like no one knows your name, and that just sort of provides like an endless opportunity.
I was so eager to be in Bath right now. First of all, because I really want to get to know Bath. I haven't been in Bath yet, and I was really looking forward. It was such a promising year, 2020.
I know, yeah.
Corona.
It's mad, isn't it?
But can I just add something about residencies? Most residencies that people can apply, usually you have to pay to do those residencies. But I don't find those residencies that interesting because it's more of a business, yeah. And it's for an elite really, because most of them are extremely expensive. So it's almost like going on an art resort.
Yes.
If you have the means to go and do it, I mean, take some time and yeah, lovely. I went on an art holiday. But usually the ones that you apply for and you get paid to go and do them, you collect more fruits from them, I think career-wise, because you've got a lot of organizations that are contributing to that. Therefore, you've got more eyes put on you rather than just, some private company that is profiting because you're there taking a holiday and they give you like the space and the materials for you to do some art. So I think there's a big difference between those two types of residencies. So yeah, I like to go on the ones that I apply and then I get to go.
Yeah, I think that's like a major problem with the art world in general. I mean, like I was reading today, it's like it's sort of one of the major goals and like also possible flaws of like artist led, is that the aim is to pay artists, but often sort of the people running these organizations, whether it's like the board of directors or whatever, like that maybe change every couple of years or however, they're not getting sort of the recognition or the like payment from the work that's put into that. And I think that there's a lot of that within the art world in general, like as you say with those residencies. I mean, I've seen a few ones that were like, I think like ceramic based ones where I was looking to pay like a couple of £1,000 to go and do it, and it's really strange. It is one of the massive problems that faces the art world, is like how can we offer things to people for free but also have the money to be able to offer the thing in the first place. And that's sort of like the big age-old question that leaves a lot of what we do beholden to funding, crowdfunding, donations, and yeah, part of my thinking at the moment is how we work as a sort of like collective voice to locally, rather than any more than that, but like to look at how you can change those things. Have no answers. have a lot of questions.
It's a really complicated historical, political problem.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And
It's been there since always, really.
Yeah, it is crazy. I think I'll move on from that and maybe discuss some of the problems and possible solutions to stuff at the end. But I've just got another question in here, which actually interestingly read on from something that you've just said, Joanna. So it's what will happen to artists in the future if people lose interest in art/beauty? Also, like they've lost interest in reading and poetry. Poets are vanishing worldwide. What a sad fact. And what do we say?
No, that is impossible.
Yeah.
I don't think it's possible. I think like poetry, arts, it's inherent to the human condition. I just think it's again an economic problem. It's just you have less poets because people need to eat above all. So they are poets, but they go on and do something else. But I just.
You want to say something, Declan?
I don't think it's necessarily that poets are dying. I think it's the idea of what a poet is dying. I think the chase of something profound is shifting. I think the poetry that we make now is just a lot more immediate. I think it's, there's, you can have someone like John Donne who's, making at the time funny poetry. I mean, we see it now as sort of like lofty and sort of wistful and sad. But, I get that from existential memes. Like some of the modern poets are on Reddit. Just there's different ideas of what we recognise as poetry now. And there's a different language of talking about it. I mean, we can have, we can express our feelings about like a current social climate in 5 emojis, but people are taking time to go through and source like images from like a 1950s TV show and like overlay text and stuff on top of it. I think the idea of beauty as something of technical prowess is shifting as well. So maybe something doesn't have to be in a haiku format. Maybe something doesn't have to be an oil painting. You can say the same thing with a cinder block. I think it's happening now rather than happening in response to a construct of what art used to look like.
I agree with you, Declan. I think as well, for a lot of people, like visual art is their way of communicating something. So I think people will always make art in whatever format that is, and whatever that might look like will change, like you said. So I think people will always make art, and it might be like Joanna said, there is always the financial aspect of how much time you can spend on that if it doesn't pay. But I think people will always make art, won't they?
I think if you allow design into the bracket of art, if we allow, design, like everything has been thought about beforehand, and there's a creative person at the forefront of literally everything that we use or care about. So I think that, I don't know. I mean, art's funny, isn't it, when you start trying to figure out what it is? But I don't think it's going anywhere. I think it's innate.
Yeah. If you think in the age of social media, like we're all curating our own Instagram feeds or Facebook feeds, like people are living more visually now, maybe because we are using digital platforms, and so how things look are becoming increasingly more important, whether that's for worse or for the better. But people are definitely gonna get more what's the word? Thoughtful maybe about how things look or what they're presenting, especially an image of themselves to the world.
Yeah, I guess interesting because like we're like living through like a current like new media spectacle, aren't we? So like we're kind of still in our infancy in terms of what a lot of people are doing with the internet, and it maybe that develops into what can become like really refined like forms of expression, and I'm sure in a lot of parts already is. you know, it's got this whole thing, you know, I mean, it's sort of off topic really, but it's, you know, it's got its entire own language through it. It's been developed over like sort of 10, 15 years now that we all sort of communicate and understand with. I mean, I don't know about anyone else, but like since lockdown, my mum's been sharing a lot of memes now. She's in on this new language, on these new forms of communication, which, you know, are used as political comedic tools. So yeah, but that is super off course. I think so. Something I wanted to discuss with everyone. I mean, we've already discussed some bits of it, but maybe we could get into it just like a little bit more in depth. Is some of the not negatives, but like some of the issues that we face within sort of where we are and within art in general. Doesn't need to get too heavy on the sad side, but I do think some realization around it would be good.
So I think for me, like everything that we said as a positive is also a double-edged sword. It just sort of like life depends on how you're looking at it. So like I was saying, the double-edged sword of the small city centre. There's a double-edged sword of these big institutions because there's an undercurrent of a narrative that some people I think buy into, that, you know, the artist that is ignored by, which I think, you know, there's reasonable evidence for, but I've always been of the opinion that if you do something good enough and loud enough, they'll come anyway. I think that's our responsibility.
Yeah.
And then, so I think, well, I think anything, it just depends how you look at it, but I think there's lots of opportunity in Liverpool. But then even that, it's quite a poor city. There isn't lots of funding. There was an article, 2 weeks ago in the Echo that says we're £44 million away from bankruptcy as a city.
Yeah.
I don't even really know what that means, but it doesn't sound very good, does it? Well, there's lots of opportunity because things are cheap. It's like there's not a lot of money.
Yeah.
So for me, it's like all the good things are also the bad things, but that's why they're good, kind of. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure. No, I completely agree with that. It's like trying to figure out that idea how you create a scene that, in terms of artist led especially, that isn't reliant solely on funding, and what that can look like in the future. And it's a definite like difficult question, but it's something that needs to be looked at from smaller institutions, because there's a lot of, it's like a sole focus on being reliant from funding bodies for survival, and there must be ways of building something from the ground up, like you would with any business.
Yeah. Well, yeah, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think, you know, what you did with your opening at the new building, you know, turning into an event. But then it's a bit sad that it has to involve alcohol, doesn't it? But that seems to be the only way that I've figured out you can make any money is by having a bar. Yeah.
Well, that's also, it is a good way to produce the income to carry on with it, and it's not, you know, does it have to be a necessary evil? I mean, does it take too much away from the art that like that's what's happening? I don't know.
No, it just makes you look at the art with different eyes. Maybe a bit more spiritual light. I don't know. I don't even drink, but I just wanted to make a joke.
No, that's fine. I think, yeah, I think humour should be involved in this conversation. Otherwise, everyone would just get sad. No, it's it is interesting. I mean, alcohol's like a massive prominent thing within art openings. It's somehow become like this the standard issue, like free booze at the opening thing, which is like so bizarre. It's like you offer everything for free as it is, and then you've got to give them drinks to go on top of it.
Did I say that I don't drink? I don't know what I'm talking about. Sorry.
But I mean, it's like finding opportunities for artists as well, because again, it's the thing. Like if we're the spaces that exist, then we need to find the money. It's just about, it's this constant battle for money and support. It's it's a tough one, but it's so important, because otherwise, like it continues to be like an exploitative narrative that sort of goes from top down. But obviously, you're starting to see like massive shifts in that from like governing bodies, with the art, like Arts Council, that can focus on like paying creators of art along with the institutions or the small spaces that show it. But it, you know, it has to come from the public as well. There's like, you know, about a way of changing whether everything deemed should be for free. Like sorry, it's a big question really, I guess, but how do you change that perspective? I guess that's the negative, that art is like, it feels like art should be free, but how do you continue to support it if everything you produce goes out for free to the public?
I think that comes straight back into the partnership model that we were talking about. I think that's just work with as many people as you've got. And if one person has money, there's an idea of, okay, if we're working with you because we believe in you, then, you know, there should be some exchange there as well. I do think that art should be free for everyone, in terms of like, otherwise you lock out a whole audience, you lock out postcodes, you lock out. But if you're working with a much larger organisation who sort of gets funding, then that's a show. If someone else is delivering it, then they should get the cash for it. I mean, if you can't do that and it's a bar, then so what? It's whatever makes people feel comfortable in a space as well. You know, we lock people who haven't been out into a gallery before. We lock them out of going into a gallery because of the tradition of what a gallery is. I think by introducing something like, I don't know, a bottle of cheap beer, it's, you know, it's not just something to do with your hands, it's something that you do in your living room. It's something that you do when you're at a space where you can talk with friends. So I think it's introducing more living room-esque elements into a gallery setting. So I don't know, does that mean less white walls? Does that mean having something like Output Gallery where people are coming in and actively producing the program? You know, is that sort of like, you guys at Convenience, you've sort of used workshops as a way of workshopping exhibitions, which is amazing. I think it's just getting as many people as involved as possible, be that sort of like funders, partners, audience, but them all being of the same hierarchy and not just having a massive vinyl above the wall.
But to be honest with you, it would be really cool to do an exercise of trying to understand what made you be interested in art. Do you have that memory? Do you remember? Because I know exactly what it was for me. Apart from my family and my upbringing, my parents are quite culture concerned. Yeah. So there's lots of film, music, books, conversations in my house. But also my kindergarten teacher, all we did was drama exercises, dance, painting. We didn't spend much time just, I don't know, just doing whatever we wanted. There was always like an artistic task. And at the end of the term, you know, there was a big show and all the kids had an important role. So, you know, I think she's still my friend nowadays because she had such a big impact, and I think she's so cool. We also did sports, and I think that's also important, but art was more important than sports, for example, in my kindergarten. And that's why my parents put me in that school. So I don't see like my nephews or the kids that I have a relationship with nowadays being so art aware. So people grow up without this, you know, art is just like something that speak about like once in a while, maybe. So for example, maybe I'm gonna travel the universe, but this road around where I live has been rebuilt 7 times in the past 6 months. So I think there's money for everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And art could be free, like you were saying, because I think it's educational, Declan. But maybe it's not very convenient for the masses for art to be accessible to everyone. Can you imagine like the critical spirit that every single citizen would add onto them if they were so, you know, inspired by art? Because I was reading this book by Albert Camus that was actually a speech that he did, Create Dangerously. He wrote this speech, and he's saying that if art is not to provoke society and to change something, then it's not art. You know,
I've got that book in my room.
Yeah, I've got it here.
yeah, that's where I got it from. but so I think there's all these things like that we can think of, because these are really complex subjects, and to go deep into them we would have to stay much longer here. But I think there's money for everything, but our society is not educating for the money to be channeled towards art.
Yeah,
for many reasons.
I'm sort of hopeful that the current situation might illuminate that more in the way, certainly in space. I think there's going to be lots of available space, and particularly in what used to be the city centres. We're already aware of the death of the high street because of online e-commerce. So then you add this on top of it. I think there's going to be an opportunity for us, people like us, to get involved in a serious way in the ways that sort of cities run and operate and what they offer their constituents for the future. Because if they just allow it to go, I mean, you know, I'm sort of hopeful and naive about this, but I'm an artist, so how else am I supposed to look at it? I think that, you know, there's an opportunity for us to sort of redirect the way that, as Joanna was saying, the way that we treat it sort of societally, by showing its value in ways that's not monetary, but just in sort of the value to use to the self.
Social value, yeah.
Yeah, so it's like this, like the social art, the social value of like art. I think it's been interesting as well. I think it's possibly like the perfect point, because as far as I can tell, there's been like a worldwide renaissance of creative engagement due to the fact that everyone realized that you can't watch Netflix for like 14 hours a day. And there's been so many, you know, I mean, I'm only talking about like a news feed on Facebook or whatever, but like I've just seen so many people retaking up hobbies that like they would have left behind for their life, and all of these things are creatively engaged because like you sat at home all day. And I'm hoping that inspires people to like continue to re-engage with that on whatever level it is. But I think the benefits of it to creativity have kind of been mad. It's been mad to see, because I just think there's so many people who have finally found the time to re-engage in something that's deemed as maybe a luxury due to it being like a pleasurable activity rather than like a necessity.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Definitely. I think
that's fine.
It's not just, I think we see art and we see artists as sort of like this heroic figure. The idea of being an artist is the idea of you're speaking for a particular people and translating some kind of social injustice. And when you were talking, Joanna, about Camus' sort of art has to be provocative and art has to sort of incite social change. I mean, Camus might be part of the problem there in terms of if art affects if we sort of put that pressure and put that sort of that crown on the artist, then that's all it'll be. But I like to think of art more as like an idea of like emotional role play. We think of it as like escapism, but I think what we really mean is we can imagine ourselves outside of our sort of environment or immediate environment. And that idea of literacy, that emotional literacy, I think is a massive part of how people engage with the world. And if we want to be nicer, I think having art as an accessible way of exercising emotions and sort of ways of dealing with prejudices and sorrow, or sort of.
But that is also provocative, isn't it? And that is challenging the social state, and that is pushing for change within the people.
Definitely, but I think
so. Maybe it doesn't mean like revolt. It just sort of means
Yeah.
it would be either of the options you've both provided.
That's what I meant. I just meant I wanted to back you up when you said that art should be free for everyone, and the artist can be can have financial support from the state. So the same way that you have, you know, I'm not sure how education is here. I think it's free until a certain age.
Yeah, until
university is extremely expensive, but where I come from, everything is mainly free. You know, uni is free as well. So I think there's room for the artists to have a lot more governmental support. It's just the budget is not distributed in that way. And when I said provocative, I like Max and understood me. So what I was trying to say is art talks about important things, you know. If not, don't choose that art to be public. Do you know what I mean? There's room for everyone, but it's like spending hours of your day talking to a person who just says words. Maybe it's a bit of a waste of time. So art as a language that has something important to say, no matter what, all kinds of subjects, because there's room for everything, for all kinds of conversations. But if it's so shallow and empty, maybe that has a different space, you know.
I think maybe for me, like the minimum value of art is just the demonstration that you can be doing something slightly off kilter. I remember that's sort of how I got introduced to creativity through graffiti. So once I sort of became aware of the language of graffiti and then started doing it, and then realizing, oh my God, you can just sort of do things. And I think that's what like the minimum level that art can display is that you can spend your time doing something that is only interesting to you until it's shown. And then even if that point it's not interesting to anyone else, there's interest in the fact that you've been interested in it. So I think even that's like a provocative idea, just to demonstrate that you can spend your time doing things that are fulfilling to you as an individual.
No doubt, that's the meta provocation.
No doubt.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think it's important, isn't it? Now it's like that, the idea of this, like, because it can work for like a sort of social liberation of people being able to have access to those things now, and then in the future, like, whilst you can have the gallery that provides these narratives, you have the education programs that run alongside them. You have these public endeavors that like allow and sort of give access for everyone to have an involvement at every level, which I think is just like thoroughly important. So maybe you don't like conceptual art, but you like to make things, and if it gets people in the door and gets people engaging with art in general, then it just increases its sort of intrinsic value, I guess, as a society. The more people that deem art important to them, the more art becomes important in general. And I think, you know, realizing, as Max said earlier, that everything that we see in front of us at some point had some involvement of someone creative, which seems obvious, but often forgetting. We can't talk for this long. That's a lie.
You love it, man.
Yeah, I just can't get my words out. Yeah, I just think that's the past, the present, and I guess the future of it. The more you can make sure that everyone engages in art on some level and enjoys forms of creativity in their life where and when they can, the more that, you know, the gallery art or like more workshops are attended, the more it just becomes a valued thing for us to spend a lot.
Declan was saying about like you want those spaces to be animated, so you want people to feel like they could go to a gallery and treat it like the living room or whatever, to actually be able to just be in those spaces as well and create. in those spaces as a way that perhaps galleries evolve, that they do become more communal, and that they do have spaces for people to come and create as well as seeing art, and that those things can all be alongside one another. Because like I was like last week with like mental health awareness, and was looking into just the self-compassion and the mental well-being that being creative and like the positive impact that can have on people as well is a big thing. So as much opportunity and accessibility to those things as possible is good. And one of the best things about this has been that people have spent time on improving their digital platforms and actually connecting with as many people as possible, where some people might not have been able to access a gallery or felt comfortable going to it. They can access it through online means, and hopefully that both things can exist alongside each other in the future as well. Just sort of further that, really.
Less about accessibility, because like obviously what we gauge from our scene is that yes, we're all open, like come in, grab a free drink. Like no one's stopped at the door and been like, who are you? It's more like relativity is like, I'm going, like as you were saying, Declan, about like this price point of being locked out of spaces. We don't question that when it comes to movies. Everyone's been to movies in their life, no matter what their paycheck or earnings has been. And it's not like we're like, oh, the cinema's locking us out at this price point to accessing all these different stories. Like that just isn't questioned, because we know that it'll find relevance to people's lives because there's genres in it. Whereas with art, it's like more about what's there in your space that's so open that I should care about. Why should I just walk in and look around? What's relative to me? Whereas with like the cinema example, it's like, oh, this is a horror film, I like horror films, or it's a rom-com, I like rom-coms. You don't need all the information, but you just need that little bit of interest to spark something that feels like something you genuinely enjoy. So that's why like getting out into community spaces, getting out into different just reaching different people, bringing the art to them and showing, oh, this is how it could fit in with what your interests are or what your aims are, and how it can aid you to either think about the world or think about your own skills and practices, what you do with your hands, what you want to make. So rather than just being like, oh, the doors are open, come anytime, it's like, yeah, but what am I coming to? So it's more a question of relativity to their lives rather than accessibility for their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's right, but I also think sort of like there are facets of cinema that is in everyone's living room. Like everyone gets to watch films for free, so if they want to go and see a larger version of that, then they've got a space that's understood from sort of childhood. Whereas
similar to that, the created experiences, like yes, I could watch the film here at home, or I can go and have that experience, be in that dark room with a large screen. And that's what we're saying. Like, we're not saying Google what Picasso's Blue Woman looks like. Like, come to Tate and come see it.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it's also it's if there was already that access, this is generally what art is like. Yeah, maybe you would get someone maybe you would get like a 12-year-old who's like, oh, I really like Impressionism. Like that sounds like foreign now, but that's because the immediate access from a young age just isn't there outside of like passing by graffiti. And I think that's only a lot of people who are already sort of emotionally literate that sparks something within. And it's our job as artists to translate that access to people. It's not just about sort of this, what we're trying to say individually. It's sort of being open to a human experience and inviting people to join in that. I don't know. I just think everyone should work together.
Yeah, you're right.
Ask a quick question on that, Declan. What do you think? There's been a change in that access, like been revoked, or?
No, I think there's just a history of art being for people who have money or sort of belong to specific institutions.
Okay.
I mean, the tape were really good in terms of like they were sugar manufacturers, weren't they? And one of them just like really liked art and started collecting it and said, "Oh, I can give this to people for free." I mean, that's really good, but we don't necessarily have those people outside of like people who want to brand themselves as they are. I think what galleries generally are doing now is trying to do that, but it's not a new idea, so people aren't as excited or incentivized to go into a gallery because it's something over there. If it was something that was, you know, oh yeah, when I was, you know, you can get people who are like, oh yeah, I really like reading a particular kind of genre of book or whatever, because, you know, that's you're taught in school and you can pick those things up. Whereas, you know, when I went to school, I think we had like 2 art classes a month or something. And it was just like go out to a tree and do like a brush on it. That doesn't mean anything to me. Like, I need how does that translate into an emotion? How does that allow me to speak to someone else about that? I'm not going to speak to them about a tree. I want a human experience. And I think that's what's missing initially. I don't know what the answer is, but
the idea of a space like the Royal Standard, or whoever, like, but would that be the idea of them going in and trying to provide that within those spaces, or bringing schools in? Because I agree that like if you become interested in it at a young age, it continues. Like I might have not been interested in art, but my father and my uncle are both not artists, but work within the creative field. So it like felt natural from like a young age, when my grandparents were teachers as well. So it was just sort of like fed to us as like the norm. Yeah. But I guess, I don't know how. Like it's interesting to think how these spaces would broach that, I guess. But that's not really a discussion point. It's more just something to think on.
It's, you know, when I was in school and we did like you know, have a go at a poem and we'll pick some of the best ones and put them in an anthology. And the idea of like, yeah, you're nodding. You might have all been in an anthology in like primary school or something. That amount of autonomy and ownership over something that you've made and published into sort of someone else's world is huge. But you know, how many sort of exhibitions have you seen on TikTok? Like, use the media that people are using.
Yeah, good point.
Well, that's why we're here. We're trying our best to be more digital than we'd ever want it to be. But I think, yeah, it's a really good point. I think there's a lot of, I don't know, a lot of fear over like accessing like those medias for an art format. That's why, like, because, you know, seeing a lot of people get labeled as like, check out this new Instagram artist rather than artist. It's because of the medium that they're solely focused on showing things through. It suddenly becomes like some sort of like parallel to being an artist in any other format, which I guess maybe worries people in terms of that. I don't know. I mean, I was scared of doing digital stuff because I'm just terrified of the internet and also working computers. So that was my sort of my main problem with working digitally. But I think it's been interesting to see a lot of benefits of this, because yeah, I think people are now realizing that the online platforms they use to promote their thing isn't like the secondary medium. It's like it runs alongside the physical space. As like with all these galleries like releasing like high quality images of their archived works and things like that. Like I think this actual like event of this pandemic has sort of wised a lot of spaces up into using what is, I guess, not really a new media, but you know, using the internet to really push what they've got either in their collection or what they're doing. I know all of us here have done something similar to that in the last couple of months. So I think it's definitely a good point. You've got to take it to where the people are as well.
Yeah, and not devaluing the idea of practice beginning as practice. Like some of the best poets of today, I'm sure, have been like writing really rubbish like song lyrics. You know, I think it's yes, one might be making a meme or something, but 5 years down the line, if you let people share that in a space that's not just with the mates, then you don't know where that's going to go. Like we can't be aware of where digital art is going to exist because the platforms are we're still putting the screws in. It's making sure that we're not saying, oh, they're an internet artist, or they're a young artist, or they're a community artist, which has so much like unneeded stigma to it.
Yeah.
Like they're an artist. And I think it's platforms that need to sort of champion that young practice, and not just labeling it as, oh, we don't usually do this. It's not part of our sort of wider program. This is just sort of a little thing.
Yeah,
The idea of the artist as the hierarchical end point is just daft.
Yeah. It's probably what is going to be the thing that causes the most like mystification to the general public as well, isn't it?
But I mean, back in before the internet, we had the public space and the private space, and then people would move, in society between those two environments. And nowadays, you've got a third space, which is this online, this web, which is incredible because you get access to a lot more information. You can just not even leave your house and just be in a library if you want. So you can have so much and you can share so much. I think it depends on how you use it, really. It's more down to the how rather than the what is this. And it's the same when you are in the public sphere and what you choose to present or how you choose to present yourself and what kind of conversations you choose to have. You can be a poet, you can be a painter, but just make informed choices of how you navigate this third space that is fairly recent in history, which is the web. So I think it's a good thing because it just gives you more opportunities to be more present. You're present here, but at the same time you can be in Japan, and that's really incredible. But yeah, I think we're still navigating the how do I do this, what's the best way to do this. So that is a challenge, but I think it's more to do with that. Or that's how I want to see it, really, because that's how it's more convenient to me, because it terrifies me as well, honestly.
Yeah.
Just looking at the time, really, with 10 minutes left, I just thought it'd be good to sort of think about what the future then might look like. What's an ideal version of how we move forward? If anyone's got any thoughts on that.
Maybe we bring it slightly locally again, because I think we've gone out into the ether of this conceptual realm of solving the problems of the entire art world.
Yeah. Anyone's got any thoughts? What's their ideal? Well, not ideal, but something they'd like to see happen locally in the future.
I really would like to see Max's event, Studio Shuffle, bring in, engaging with studios in Glasgow, Bath, everywhere.
Me too. Part of the plan.
Because it was the event that it came to Liverpool in this recent past, and it was really positive. It was actually incredible. I would like to see Liverpool Biennial show more local artists, but
Yeah, we can dream.
Yeah, that's not as easy. Just because I can say that to Max is just right there. It seems easier. But yeah, these two things I would really like to see happening.
Yeah, I think it's important for the representation of like the local of stuff going on locally to be shown within these larger settings. Oh my god. Within sorry guys. I think tea's ready or something. Yeah, within these larger settings, because that's what that's what keeps what's going to keep people in the city and keep the city developing. If like, but also running alongside that, there's got to be, as we say, these other people coming in. Like, otherwise we fall back into that cycle of just being, same faces, same people, same things constantly, which is great in terms of like our local community. But to continue to build this art scene, we have to be bringing in people from everywhere and opening those conversations and opening those networks. And
hopefully Studio Shuffle becomes like some sort of fashion week. So every weekend it goes on a tour around the country. You have, like, you were this trendsetter that started in Liverpool, but then every weekend you've got a Studio Shuffle in some city around the UK. How cool would that be?
We should get you in as brand development, Joanna. You've got the job.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I think that I want to go on. What you saying?
No, I was just going to say that would be amazing. So
I want more people to feed into it, because it just sort of happened. I didn't really know what I was doing at all. I mean, I've only done 2. The second one was really good. I'm really proud of the second one. I think that it worked, and I learned some new little extra tricks and things that I think will be good for next time. But I'm definitely, 2020's coupled a lot of things, isn't it?
Yes.
There's lots of things that are missing. We should be ramping up for the next shuffle now. But again, I think the shuffle will benefit from extra space. I think that like it's been positively received. So I think that I've got a reasonable leg to stand on to start asking people for things like extra space and, more integration from outside studios. So it's definitely on the to-do list.
Sure, but you're in the same as everyone else. Everything is paused at the moment.
Yeah, that's right.
Doesn't matter.
No.
That's why it's a good time for these discussions. It's been like reflective and being like, all right, we all do a lot of doing and a lot of setting up and a lot of sort of, developing these things that happen in the physical world. It's sort of been nice to take a pause and consider it's given that breathing room to consider, like, well, shit, how can I build these things? How can I work with these other people? And those things will have happened naturally over a time progression, but now it's kind of like, well, I can just sit here and think about it and develop those ideas, and then instead of it happening in a year's time, it could happen in, well, yeah, I'd have no idea when it can happen, obviously. But you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's a good time for reflection and development of ideas, and a nice pause from the sort of like the physical actions.
What about you, Claire? Have you got any thoughts on the future?
I would like to see more of a connection between the council in terms of giving spaces and stuff, and like the trust, because I think that'd be really exciting to take up more space in the city and be more visible to the locals and also tourists, because we get loads of tourists. So I think that'd be quite exciting to see like a stronger relationship there. And then I think I'd also like to see like more further down the line, like a fully flourished grassroots organisation or like pop-up space that's really developed in the Liverpool art scene or Merseyside art scene, and sort of more of a sharing of things that went wrong, things we've tested, experiments, because we're still in a relatively new field, like the artist led, like there's not so much literature on it, there's not so much sharing of, oh yeah, we tried that, this is why it didn't work, we tried this is why it did work. So I feel like maybe the same mistakes are being repeated, or things that could be avoided, or if you, sometimes it feels like ideas are being repeated, and that's, yeah, it can be good and bad, but I think it'd be nice to see this gap bridge between these large organizations that surround us and create the industry, and then the smaller DIY project spaces, which are more the scene.
Yeah.
So shout out to you, Convenience, as well. Let's do more things.
Yeah, I think that is sort of the goal, isn't it? It's about being, it's about, you know, does Artist Led have to run as this sort of like, what's the word, like, not, well, I don't know what the word is. I'm losing the plot. Sort of like anarchistic, like kind of thing going on outside of the rest of the art world, and I think definitely in Liverpool it's starting to feel like there's becoming this, like, definitely seeming to me like it feels like there's becoming more of a middle ground between it, and they're not necessarily just the things on the ether, but it's the definite involvement in the conversation. It's making sure that as these smaller spaces, you capitalize on this moment, and hopefully it's still there when all this is done with.
What about you, Dak? Is there any big thoughts, big plans?
Yeah, I mean, I was just going to pick up on Claire's point. I think is an idea of like you were saying, Ryan, the artist-led scene being this thing that's on the fringe, or often called the fringe, is the answer. Sort of making a public program more public is the answer. Putting out a program maybe like a year in advance and allowing creatives and local DIY spaces to actually, you know, plan something in response to that or alongside that. So when it launches, it's not just, you know, big gallery and then later on smaller galleries tackling a similar theme. Is it, you know, this is what we're going to be doing next year. Like, these are all the points that we want to put in place. Who wants to help us build it? I think that's how you build a sense of community. That's how you build, you know, a sense of like, oh, we could do a school trip there next year. And it's funny because we're actually part of this small organisation that's working with, I don't know, plant sustainability. You know, if that's what the show's about next year, we could definitely put something in place. You know, we can apply for funding. We've got time to contact artists instead of everything just being, okay, now the big show's happening and sort of you're only cool if you knew about it sort of a couple of minutes beforehand type thing.
Yeah, maybe it's that idea of like not self-categorizing ourselves within this like realm of saying we're this small space, we're this, we're that. It's, you know, just about thinking ourselves as we are a space and we can run in conjunction with whatever's going on and we can work with these things. Because maybe it's detrimental to always say we're the fringe of this, we're that. Yeah, it's about how we all self-identify what we do as well.
I love the idea and like the sense of like collaborative planning as well, and having that conversation and dialogue about what it is, say that we're exhibiting and what it is that the biennial's going to do and what the take is. And I think those conversations would help, and we've landed at a place where we feel that we do need to plan further in advance anyway, to give yourself that time, as you say, to apply for funding and to make sure that everything is in place so that, you know, what you're doing can happen in the best way possible. So I think that's a really nice sentiment, and hopefully something that can happen. Definitely into that.
Agree with that selling prophecy. Like, if you're always calling yourself small or fringe, then that's where you're gonna limit yourself to that. But it's like we need to flip the narrative of like these artists that are now at like the height of their career that are being exhibited in these larger institutions that surround us. They probably came most likely from artist-led spaces. Like, they've obviously worked themselves up. So we are like the little hubs that nurture the talent that then gets exhibited in these places that maybe don't want to cooperate with the smaller guys or whatever. So it's interesting if you flip the narrative, like, oh no, we're actually producing your future shows maybe 10, 20 years in advance, but we are the people who are giving them the space, that are giving them the materials, that are giving them projects to work on, and then they'll end up on your walls or in your space in the future.
That was very good. Yeah, I like that.
So I guess in conclusion, the future sort of looks like collaboration, continuing to build on the identities that we have, diversifying in terms of like the program to make sure that it allows access for everyone, and then the same old normal worries.
Yeah. Maybe we just never come off Zoom. Maybe just like the art world's on Zoom. We'll all just chat, shall we?
A bit less burnt out than normal. Yeah, well, that's it. Maybe you sit here with. I just thought that was the most interesting part. Oh no, what's happening there? Sorry. The most interesting part on the first day of like realizing that now you could just sort of like message whoever you want because they're sat at home and see if they fancy to chat. Whether from whatever institution they're at, I guess, which is something that you could capitalize on outside of this. You don't necessarily need to go to a place to get into a conversation, which has been like a massive. It seems like glaringly obvious, but like I've never been on a Zoom call before this started. So yeah, I guess it's that realizing the digital is as important as the physical as well now, and accepting that rather than possibly fighting against it and using it as a positive tool. Did we solve any other problems?
Thanks everyone for coming on as well and chatting. It's been really good. It's been lovely. Yeah,
thank you to Fringe Art Bath as well for having us during this time. Hope everyone's watching 2 hours of us. All right, thank you. Oh, thank you, everyone.
Okay.
I'll see everyone when it's safe to do so.
Yeah. See you, everyone.
See you later.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye, Claire.